about what I'm going to bring up here. But you said that imperialism is anything that can hold back economic development. Um, so China, this is an argument that Marxist-Leninist Maoists use, is that China is funding the Filipino government to take down the Maoist group that's over there, these revolutionaries that are trying to, install revolution so they can have a country that works more, economically for their people there. What's your argument about whether that is imperialism or whether that's not imperialism?
Well, I think that, for a long time, the Philippines has just been a puppet of the United States. For many years, it was just a straight up puppet of the United States. There was the Marcos military dictatorship there. There started to be a feeling, we saw a rise of anti-imperialist sentiments in the Philippines. And, there has been a long-standing communist insurgency. There are a number of islands that are under the control of communist rebels. But there's also among the capitalists and among, non-communist folks in the Philippines, there's also been an increasing anti-imperialist sentiment. And, Duterte was elected and he had the endorsement of the communists. Jose Maria Sison, who is the leader of the communists in exile, I believe he's in the Netherlands, he endorsed Duterte in the elections. And Duterte's election was a popular front. He was seen as kind of the anti-imperialist candidate, more friendly to China, less friendly to the United States. And I believe Duterte even appointed a member of the illegal underground communist party to be like in his cabinet for a moment or something. But for whatever reason, the communists in the Philippines that controls certain islands and the Duterte government, they don't see eye to eye. They were not able to negotiate. They had peace talks going on for a while, and those peace talks have fallen apart. And that's deeply sad because I would like to see a situation where the communists are allowed to join the government of the Philippines and the people of the Philippines can have communists in their government and can have peace and not have a civil war going on. But Duterte and the communists, they negotiated, but they were unable to reach an agreement. So unfortunately, the war has continued, and that's not good for anybody. I think the communists would prefer to not be fighting, and I think that Duterte, and many of his supporters would prefer the war is over as well. But China, on the other hand, is doing business with the Philippines. And the Philippines is more independent now under Duterte than it has been in a long time. Under Duterte, they have significantly rolled back the presence of U.S. corporations. They're more willing to negotiate with China when it comes to the South China Sea. So that's a step forward for China to have the Philippines not just be a U.S. puppet, to have the Philippines, as a country that might be more friendly to them. So it makes sense that China would have a relationship with the Philippines, right? It makes sense that China would have a relationship with the Philippines. And China's position is generally that they are not involved in the political struggles of other countries, right? They're not sending weapons to the Maoist communist rebels. The Communist Party of the Philippines cut ties with the Chinese Communist Party in 1976. There's no relationship there. And China doesn't think it's its responsibility to be giving weapons and guns to a group of people and fomenting civil war in the Philippines. That's not the role that they want to play, right? Tim Pool and all of them were on there saying China wants to roll in with the tanks and, get rid of all our social media and round up all the intellectuals. No, they don't. Like, China does not want to spread communism all over the world. They're not Trotskyites. They don't believe in the theory of permanent revolution. China believes that their role is to engage in peaceful economic development and cooperation. That's their role, right? So, this Maoist communist group and the government of the Philippines, they're negotiating, and China has nothing to do with them, but China has to have a relationship with the government of the Philippines because the South China Sea is very important, and the United States is increasing its military presence there. So what China is doing in the Philippines, it makes sense that they would have if there were any government in the Philippines, Duterte or anybody, they would want to have a relationship with them and negotiate with them. And Duterte is more willing to work with China than previous administrations. So, that's a bit of an oversimplification there. But overall, it's not that simple. But we shouldn't be expecting China to be sending weapons and guns all over the world because that's not the kind of country they are. And imagine if they were doing that, right? I mean, look at what Tim Pool and all of them were saying. Right? I mean, imagine if China was giving guns and weapons to people to spread violent communist revolutions. Imagine what they would say. And imagine how effective the United States would be in putting sanctions on them and isolating them if they operated that way. That's not the kind of country that China is. At
Oh
this
no,
time.
but I was not that they're. No, my question wasn't whether they should sell weapons to the Maoist group. It was are they selling it to the Filipino government to aid in their fight against the Maoist group? Is that what they're doing?
Certainly doing business with the government of the Philippines. I don't know if they're selling weapons or not. I mean, the main
Okay.
weapons exporter is the United States, and there is a U.S. military presence in the Philippines. It's technically like rented, I believe. It's not, the USA doesn't have like a permanent base. They have to rent it from the government of the Philippines. There's actual U.S. military folks in the Philippines and has been for a long time. The Philippines was at one point a U.S. territory. But I don't know if China is actually giving weapons to the government of the Philippines. But they're doing business with them, absolutely, and they would be happy to do business with any government in the Philippines, just like they do government business with folks in Myanmar, just like they do business with folks in Vietnam. And that keep in mind that oil, right? China, one of its biggest weaknesses is that it's dependent on foreign oil. They do not have enough oil in China to keep their economy going. That's why they import a lot of Russian oil, but most of the oil that China imports comes on oil tankers that go through the South China Sea. That South China Sea, that is where they get their oil from. And that's why the United States is building up a huge military presence in the South China Sea, because it's a threat on China. They're saying basically at any point, if we want to just cut off your oil supply, China, we can do that. And it's a threat hanging over China's head. And that's why China has increased its own military presence in the South China Sea. So they could stop the United States if it tried to do that. But the United States wants to have the oil veto over China. And China, that is a big weakness that they have. And they don't want the United States to be able to do that. So the fact that they can have a relationship with the Philippines, that they can have a relationship with some of the other governments in that region, that enables them to put a check on the USA's ability to have an oil veto over their economy.